Okay, hello everyone. So I've been quite busy making my outfit for Supernova, which was last weekend. I was really happy with how it turned out. If you didn't see my kind of little vlogs about it, I went as Oswald Cobblepot from Gotham, who is Penguin. I absolutely love his character and I really was excited to make this outfit. I think it looks really similar to the one in the show. I was really happy with it personally. I'm going to show it in making it in 3 different videos, so the jacket, the vest, and then the pants. So if you just want to watch one of them, that is totally cool. You can just make one of the pieces, because I did make them so that they weren't such costumey pieces that they could be worn by themselves. So I'm going to show you how to make the jacket in this video. I'm really happy with how the jacket turned out. Like I said, I wanted to make it not super costumey. I think it also works just as a really nice blazer, and I'll definitely be wearing it again. So yeah, I'm really happy with how it turned out, with the contrast lapel, kind of fancy button on it, really nice, kind of like fitted shape, super cute. I'm really happy with it. So yeah, I'll show you how to make it. Okay, so the pieces you need are 2 of the upper sleeve piece, so there'll be a pair, so cut with right sides together, a pair of the undersleeve as well, so cut right sides together, a pair of the back as well, making sure to mark in the drill holes for the dart and the vent at the back, pair of the front, so again right sides together, marking in the drill hole for the dart and also marking in the notch of the collar. You also need a pair of the front lining, and this will be cut in the lining fabric, a pair of the under sleeve lining, again in the lining fabric, a pair of the upper sleeve lining, again in the lining fabric, 1 single of the left back lining. So this needs to be cut with the right side facing the left of the body. So if this was going to sit against my back, the right side will be this side because that's the left of my body. Single of the right back lining, so this will be the opposite to the left back lining. So this side is the right side and that will be facing my body. Then the under collar, I've cut in the contrast satin, however you can just cut this in the main fabric as well. Also I've marked in the seam allowance just on the edge here and also where it will fold. Also make note that this is cut on the bias. The collar piece is cut in the main fabric, and again I've marked in the seam line along the edge here and then the fold line there, and this is cut on the fold. And then the front facing piece we will cut out of this contrast satin again. If you don't want the contrast lapel, then you can just do it in the main fabric. I have done the fold line also marked in and these corners. I've also cut this with the fusing as well. I forgot to say with the under collar as well, this was cut out of fusing as well. Okay, so the first thing I'm going to do is take the front facing and the under collar. So what I'm going to do with the wrong side facing up, so this is the side with the markings, I'll likely need to draw these markings on again. So we're just going to put the fusing on that side, so with the glue side of the fusing facing down, and I'll just go and iron that. Depending on the type of fusing, the markings might be visible, they might not. So just keep your piece handy so you can draw those back in when needed. So I'm going to go in and iron all of these down and then we can begin sewing. Okay, so I applied the fusing onto all of these 4 pieces and redrew in the chalk lines. Okay, now I'm grabbing the front and the back, and what I'm going to do is sew up the darts. So this one, it's just 1 centimeter up, and then when it gets to this point just taper it in to the drill hole, and on this one it's just from this drill hole connecting those drill holes up here, and that will be that one. Okay, so that is what the inside of the front piece will look like and what the right side of it will look like. I'm going to press all of these down so that the seams face towards the back, and then the back will look like this on the inside and that on the right side. So I'm going to press this down as well. Depending on your fabric, you may need to snip into this so that it can be pressed down nice and flat. So I'll press these and then go on to the next step. Okay, now these have been pressed, I'm going to lay the two back pieces down with the right sides facing up, and then I'm going to take the front piece and lay them with the right sides facing down on top of them, and I'm going to pin the side seams and stitch those with 1 centimeter seam allowance, and pin the shoulders as well and sew them with 1 centimeter. So there'll be 4 seams sewn in total. Okay, so this is the side seam and shoulder sewn, and here I've just turned it inside out. Okay, now what we're going to do is place the right sides of the back together. So what I've done here is I've just marked in the corner of the seams. So what we'll do is place this here, and we'll just sew down to that mark there. So all the way down the back, just to that point there. Okay, so this back seam is now sewn. What I'm going to do is I'm going to press it so the seam sits flat and open like this, and I'm going to do the same with the side seams and the shoulder seams as well, so everything is sitting flat and open. So what I'm going to do is taking the upper sleeve and placing it with the right sides facing up, and then taking the undersleeve and placing that on top, and all I'm going to do is pin the two edges together and sew them with 1 centimeter seam allowance. Okay, so all the seams in the body of the jacket have been pressed open, or if they're closed seams like the dart, then pressed towards the back. The sleeves have been sewn with 1 centimeter seam allowance, and these seams have also been pressed open as well. Now what I'm going to do is along the top of the sleeve here, I'm going to do a basting stitch. So turn the stitch length up to the highest number and just do a stitch running along the top here. This is just to create some ease when putting it into the jacket. So I'm going to do that, pull it tight just like a little bit, and then I'm going to press it so that it sits rounded and curved. This is just so it sits in the jacket nicer, so that it doesn't pucker or anything like that when it is put in the jacket. Okay, so this is what the sleeve should look like. It's got the basting stitch in it, been slightly gathered, and then I have just gone over it lightly with some steam and heat to create the nice curve and to get rid of any puckers that pulling the basting stitch has caused. And now we're going to insert this into the jacket. Placing the sleeve down, I will then put the jacket over the top and match up the notches of the bottom notch, which matches the side seam, the top notch which matches the shoulder seam, and then the notches on the side match up with the two sleeve seams, and then I'll pin around the rest. And then do the same on the other side as well. Okay, so the sleeve has been inserted, so it will look like this on the outside. Just like that. Now I'm going to work on the collar. So taking the under collar pieces with the right side facing up and this one with the right side facing down, I'll stitch along this edge 1 centimeter. Okay, so I sewed the two undercollar pieces together along the back seam. Now I'm going to press that seam open like that. After pressing it open along this top edge, so this is the piece attached to the neck, this is the top edge, I'm going to place the top collar with the right side facing up, some with the right side facing down, and stitch 1 centimeter along that top edge. Okay, so I've stitched along this edge. Now all I'm going to do is folding the seams towards the undercollar. I'm going to edge stitch along the whole seam. Okay, so that has been understitched like so. That will just mean that when it's sitting flat, the satin underneath won't show through or anything. Now taking the front of the jacket again, what we're going to do is stitch 1 centimeter away all around this cornered piece here. So this can just be a basting stitch, it doesn't need to be permanent. It's just because we're going to be doing some cutting into these corners and some tight turns there, so we need to just reinforce it. Okay, so I put stitching in around those corners on both sides. Now I'm going to take the collar piece. So this undercollar is one that's going to be attached to the main body because it's going to sit flat like that. So what we're going to do is match the center backs and pin it all the way along here to this point and all the way along here to this point, so that's 1 centimeter in from the edge, and then we will pivot by cutting into the fabric here and spinning this around, and then stitch down to this point, which again is 1 centimeter in. So that's why it's important to mark in all of these points on the pieces. So as you can see here, I've marked it in and now it's got the stitching over top. It's even easier to see. So we're going to go around and do that. Okay, so the collar has been attached just like so. So what I'm going to do now is snip into this other corner that we put the stitch on. Just like that, and then pull it around straight in line with the collar there, and there's a notch here which should match up with where the end of the undercollar is, just like that. So just here we're going to stitch up to that point, not any further than that point, because that's where we're going to attach it to the front lapel. So I'm just going to pin that and stitch that down, and then obviously do the same thing on the other side as well. Okay, so that is all stitched on. That's what it looks like on the inside, and that's what it looks like on the outside. So I'm just gonna leave this for now and come back to working on the collar once we've done a bit more of the lining. Okay, so for the lining, it's really similar to doing the outer shell. It's just about stitching all of the side seams together, any panel lines together, and stitching the shoulders. So what I'm going to do is I've got the 2 front facing pieces. I'm going to place those facing up, and then I'll grab the front lining pieces, and with right sides facing down like so, I'm going to pin from the top down and sew that with 1 centimeter seam. Okay, so these have both been sewn just with the 1 centimeter seam allowance, like so. Now we're going to take the back piece. So make note of which piece it is, because there is a right and left piece. So this one is the right piece. So that makes this the right side of the fabric, which means it will go face down on this piece of the jacket and be stitched along the shoulder and the side seam. So what we did for the right side we'll also do for the left piece as well. So the main difference in this piece is just this vent at the back. So it's not too big a deal if you get the sides confused. It just means your vent will fold to the other side. Okay, now just so I can sew it all at the machine at once, I'm also going to do the back seam. So pulling these together so that the right sides are facing together, just like so, I will stitch down this back piece to this point marked here, and then down to this point marked here, and then we will do the dart later. I mean the vent later, sorry. So just from that point, this point, step it in and bring it all the way up. Okay, so all of the seams have been sewn together. I'm going to press them all open except for this first one where I'll press it away from the front facing. That's just kind of an aesthetic choice. I like it to have all this fabric kind of pushed to that side, but if you want to press it open or press the other way, then do what you like. The next thing is at the back neck. There are two little notches. That's because there is a bit of space added to this back piece, so all you've got to do is match up the notches and stitch that down. So folding this in half, you can match up the notches, stitch across there, and then you can either choose to stitch it down just to one side of the neck like that, or you can stitch it flat down like that, so it's more of a box pleat. It's really up to you. I'm just going to push it to one side because I think that's kind of easier, and it looks just as good. Okay, now that's all pressed and the neck is stitched down, I'm going to attach the collar. So I'm going to do the same thing that we did on the body fabric. So I'll stitch along these corners here, just with a basting stitch, because we need to reinforce those corners. Okay, those corners have been stitched over. Now taking the collar, which is attached to the main piece, this is this part of the collar, so not the under collar, the main one. We're going to attach it in the exact same way that we attached the under collar to the main body. So with right sides together, we'll match the back here and then stitch down, pivot and stitch around again, the exact same way we did the one attached to the main body. Okay, so that is all stitched on. It's just this little point that needs to be stitched up now and then down the front. So what I'm going to do first though is I'm going to go through and just press all of these seams open on both sides and trim them where necessary. So some of these corners, when they get pushed back, they get a little bit bulky. So I'm just going to snip into them and trim them a little bit. Just make sure everything is nice and clean. After doing all the trimming, what I'm going to do is pulling all of this to the side. I'm going to grab the front pieces. So with the fold of the collar matching up here, and then sew up here to the point, and then sew all the way down the front as well. And with this I will also just trim the corners so that it can be turned through to a really neat point, and I'll do that on both sides. Okay, so that has all been pressed and the points have been turned back out like so. So now what I'm going to do is along the front edge here, I'm going to stitch. There's a point inside the seam that you should be able to feel where there's a notch, so you need to cut that right down to the seam line. On this side of that notch, you need to stitch on the plain fabric, and on this side we stitch on the satin. That's because this is the point where the seam will turn out like so. So we don't want the stitching showing, it's just going to be an edge stitch to keep the plain fabric hidden underneath the satin and the satin hidden at the front. So I'm going to do that on both sides. As well as doing that, I'm going to, at the back here, from the shoulder seam to the other shoulder seam, pinch these two together along there, already sewn seams, and sew it within the seam allowance together. This is just to stop any slippage happening out here. So if it wasn't sewn together, this can move up and down freely, whereas when it is sewn together, it's stuck there and it won't move around. Okay, so the stitching is done and the two collars are attached to each other. Now what I'm going to do is press this front so it's nice and flat, and also insert the shoulder pads. So this is optional because this jacket could work without shoulder pads. I've designed it to have shoulder pads, so it's just the style I like. So all I'm going to do is on the inside of the garment, so inside the lining, I'm going to place these so the center of them line up with the shoulder seam, so you can see the shoulder seam there. So all I'm going to do is line it up so this edge sits against the edge of the sleeve, so that's the thick edge, and then the thinner edge sits here. I'm just going to hand stitch this on. I'm going to hand stitch it on to the seam allowance, so not to the actual garment, not where anything will be seen, just to the seam allowance there. So I'm going to attach it in those two places, just along the center there on both sides. Okay, now that the shoulder pads are inserted, like so, what I'm going to do is add the sleeve lining. So taking the two sleeve lining pieces, we're going to sew this the exact same way we did the main body. So I've just placed the smaller piece on top of the larger piece with the right sides together, and we'll just pin and sew both of the edges. Okay, so now I've stitched both of those with 1 centimeter seam allowance, and I've just pressed them open. That's just so they'll have a nicer finish on the inside of the garment. Now what I'm going to do is take the main jacket and flip it around like so, so all the lining seams are facing out, and then I'll turn the sleeve that we just sewed inside out so it's the right way around, and I'm going to put that underneath this piece, and just like we did with the main body, match up all the notches and sew it in there with 1 centimeter seam allowance. Okay, so the sleeve lining has been inserted. I'm going to flip this right side round again and then push the sleeves through the main body sleeves. Okay, now the next things we need to do is just the hem of the sleeves, the hem of the bottom and the back vent, and then final touch we're putting on the button. Okay, so now to do the sleeves, we need to sew this from the inside. It's quite confusing to understand, but basically we need to keep the garment in the same alignment that it's in currently. We don't want to be sewing it on the outside, if that makes sense. We need to keep everything still turned the way it is. So I'm going to come down the sleeve and grab the ends, just like that. And then this way, this is grabbed at the way it's going to tuck back in. So what we can do is match up the sleeve side seams and pin all the way around and sew. I advise, especially if this is the first time you're doing a fully lined garment like this, that you pin it and then you push it back through to double check that it's pinned in the correct way. Also, you will probably be able to tell this is going to be quite a hard seam to sew because it is really kind of quite convoluted. That's normal. You'll just have to kind of cope with that and do your best. Okay, so it will kind of look like this when it is stitched together before you turn it inside out again. So we'll pull those through again. And then it should be sitting just kind of like a normal jacket sleeve. It should all be nice and fully lined. Definitely go through and press this as well so that it sits nice and flat and has a nice crisp edge to it. Okay, the next pieces we'll work on are the front part of the hem and also this back vent. So with the back vent, what we want to do is on the main fabric, stitch along the top of this slanted line, only down to the marked point there. So that's 1 centimeter in from each side. In this one, we'll do the same, except in this, on the lining, we've got 2 different angles, and you'll likely need to snip in along this edge to make sure that it sits flat. So just like that, and the points should match up. So just like that, stitching there and stitching there. Now both of those are stitched. What we're going to do is attach the hems before we attach this free edge. So all I'm going to do is flip it around so that the right side's together. Okay, so flipping it with the right sides together, we're going to take this side, which has the kind of like pointing out bit of the vent, and this side has the pointing in bit. We're going to attach the hem just like this, and we'll stitch that with 1 centimeter seam allowance, just about 15 centimeters or so in length. Okay, so this side's a little bit more tricky. This is the side with the kind of like dented in back vent. So what we're going to do is we're going to match it at this seam first, and you'll see why in a minute. It's because the lengths are actually different. So matching it there and then pulling it across, we can see that there's a lot more fabric in the main body, and that's okay, that's what we want. So what we're going to do is just pin that in there, and again, I'm only going to sew about 15 centimeters or so of it. And what we're going to do is leave 1 centimeter on this edge free. So we're going to stitch all along here up until 1 centimeter and then stop, and then we'll finish the rest off in a minute. Just like that, and then pull it down flat like this. So that means that the lining's going to sit a little bit up. That's because the hem is turned up. There we go. And just make note that the lining and all the seams are facing up that way. And that will just create a neater finish on the inside. Also make note of how big the hem is. So this should automatically give you your hem length, but you can double check it against the pattern as well. So it should be 4 centimeters, which it is, and that's important for on this side. So on this side, what I'm going to do is mark in the 4 centimeter hem along here. Okay, so I've marked in just 4 centimeters up, and then what I'm going to do is just lay this as flat as I can and just mark in where that finishes. So where that finishes should be 1 centimeter in from, if we fold this in half, from where that notch is, like that. And then we're going to just mark 1 centimeter down from where we marked the 4 centimeters. Okay, so when this line, and this one are marked in, so that's 4 centimeters up from the edge, 3 centimeters up from the edge, and in line with this, what I'm going to do is cut in along the 3 centimeters and down this edge. I'm also going to make sure I transfer where this notch is up here, so I can just do that by creating a straight line and marking it up. Now what I'm going to do is 1 centimeter in from both of these edges. I'm just going to create a little kind of triangle stitch. That's just to reinforce this corner. So I'm going to do that and stitch this other side. Okay, so on this side where we've fully stitched it, should be able to turn it inside out and it will look something like that. So nice neat finish on
this side where we've done the box, we're just going to snip in to that corner. Okay, now what we do is, now that we've snipped into this, it kind of becomes a little bit more separated, and we can make sure these points are matching here and pull it down like so, and 1 centimeter in from here should match up with that corner that we just cut into. And just like before, we want to make sure all the seams and the lining seam and everything is facing up that way for a neat finish. Okay, now that that has been stitched, what we're going to do is, with this just little like kind of leftover bit, we're going to pull it out like that, making sure the notch is on the fold. It should be anyway, because if you've measured correctly, it should be matching up. And we're just going to pin it and then stitch along that edge. Now, depending on your fabric, how thick it is and how bulky it is, you might want to cut the corners of both this one and the other side, just so when it turns through it's neater. You also might want to cut this little flap off as well. So I'll turn it inside out and press it. Okay, so that is what it will look like on the inside. So just make sure to go over and press it so all the seams are lying flat, and that's what the other piece will look like. And from the outside it should look like this, so just be a really clean, simple finish, but just make sure to go over and press everything so nothing kind of bubbles up or anything like that. Now for the front part of the hem, the reason I'm doing this in sections is because, like how complicated this was, if you mess something up, you don't have to undo everything. It's just easier to do a little section by little section. So working with the front, I'm going to turn it over on itself like so. And then I'll stitch down, leaving 1 centimeter on this edge. Okay, for the front hem, as you can see, there's kind of like a step down. So what we're going to do is, I'm just going to unpick a few of the stitches up here. That'll just make it a little bit easier to manipulate everything. Okay, now that that is unpicked, what I'm going to do is attach it to the hem here. So I can't attach it all the way. I'm probably just going to do like literally 5 centimeters or so, just so it's left open and easy to access. So I stitched that. Now what I'm going to do is pull this flat like so and stitch up just to 1 centimeter away. So that is on the fused front facing and the front piece. Okay, so I stitched along that edge. Now what I'm going to do to close up this last little bit is, along the seam of the fused front facing, which attaches to the lining, I'm going to attach the bottom bit of the hem. So all this means is I'm just going to fold it up like so. Now, depending on slight sewing errors and stuff, the lining might be a little bit longer, and that's okay. Just make sure that you fold it up neatly like this, so it sits folded around like that, just like so. I'm going to stitch down from where we unpicked all the way down to the point here, and also snip into this point as well so that it can pivot easier. Okay, so that is all stitched down. All I'm going to do now is just trim off this excess here and trim off the corner as well. This is just so when we fold it through, it creates a neater look. When we fold it through, it should look something like this. So making sure it's folded right on the edge here, the lining will hang over like that. And there will be a little bit still left to sew, but we'll do that later. So I'm going to do this on the other side and then also press these so they sit nice and flat. Okay, so everything has been pressed nicely and we're ready to go. When I was at the iron, I also pressed the hem up 4 centimeters on the bits that aren't sewn as well. Now, to sew these parts, there's a couple ways you can do it. You can do it by hand. I prefer not to do it this way just because I feel I can get a cleaner finish if I do it on the machine. But if you do it on the machine, you are going to need to do some sewing by hand. what I'll do is I'll just open this seam up by unpicking a few of these stitches, and I'll enter through here and sew it through this gap. This is quite a hard way to sew it because you're only given a certain amount of space and you have to sew it back up through there, but I think it creates a cleaner finish on the bottom of the garment. What we can do while one side is open is we can sew the other side through that side, if that makes sense. So coming through this side, I'll bring up this end, so pulling it through that hole, and then just pulling it straight so it sits flat, and I'll pin it and then stitch along there so you can see where we stitched it before and meet it up again in the middle. Okay, that's stitched. I'll pull it back through, and there we go. On that side the hem is all stitched up and neat. You can go through and press this again if you like. I think it should be fine. I don't mind the lining being a bit bubbly. So then to finish up this bit of hem, like I said, if you want to finish this by hand stitching it, feel free, do that. I prefer not to, so I'm just going to open up this seam about like 15 centimeters or so. I might need to open it more, just depending on how I go sewing it. Okay, so that is all sewn up. I'll pull it through again and it's nice and stitched. Now, what I like about opening this up and then closing it again is because we've already stitched it and pressed it, it's really easy to know where to put the needle and where to stitch it by hand without having to worry about making sure you're hitting the 1 centimeter mark and you're keeping the seam straight. So I'm going to go through and stitch this shut just by slip stitching it. Okay, to place the button, just going to lay this as flat as possible and put this over the top, keeping in mind that the seam allowance is now gone. So just mark it there. And then same on the other side as well. Now if I grab the button, I can place it and see where I need to put the buttonhole. So my machine has this buttonhole kind of foot, I suppose. And what you can do is move this up and check the button size against it, and that way this foot will only go up as high as the button, so it will create the perfect width for it. Basically what you want is you want it to be just a little bit wider than the original button. Now keep in mind also the button is going to be attached on this left hand side and the buttonhole will go on this side. So I'm going to start the buttonhole about 1 centimeter away from this mark. I just want it to sit really close to the edge. Obviously you can situate it closer to this mark if you'd like as well. So I'm just going to draw this line in, and then the button will be sewn exactly over that hole. And with this chalk, it is removable, it will just wipe off. If you're having any difficulty wiping chalk off, just like a damp cloth should be able to get rid of it. So I'm going to apply that on the machine. The machine I have has a setting for buttonholes. I feel like most machines nowadays do. If yours don't, I would advise either adding some sort of snap button and then sewing your button on top of that to kind of like hide the fact that it's a snap button, or you can look up ways to do it with your by hand sewing, but that can be a little bit inaccurate and a little bit more messy. Okay, thank you so much for watching. I hope you liked the video. I hope it showed you how to make this jacket, maybe even give you some tips on how to make any other jackets you might be making. This pattern will be up on my shop. It might be up a few days after this video just because I have to go through and scan it, make the PDF, all of that fun stuff. So keep an eye out for that. I'll probably put something up on Instagram or Twitter or something when it's out and available. I'm also going to be putting it up as separate pieces as well as a bundle for a cheaper price. So if you do want to buy it, you can do that. Also, my shop has kind of like a new look. I've moved away from Etsy and set up my own little shop on my blog.
just kind of make it easier. And also then you have the option of adding resizing if you want it resized. I'm even doing custom made pieces, so if you want something made to order, I will happily sew it for you. All the details are up there. I'll link down below everything as well. So yeah, thank you for watching. Please subscribe, like the video, comment, all of that fun stuff. And yeah, bye!